What's up, everyone? Thralls of Metal back again. I am Shredlord.
Necrotic Nick.
And we are here to bring you another excellent album review. This time we are reviewing the band Downfall of Gaia, and the album is Silhouettes of Disgust.
Very dramatic.
Thank you.
This also comes out on the 17th of March. Happy belated St. Patty's again. This comes out on Metal Blade Records. This band formed in 2008 in Germany. This is their 6th full-length overall. I actually brought up one of their albums, and actually the only album I own by this band, and I want to say an underrated album thing forever ago. Aeons Unveils the Thrones of Decay was the one that I brought up, and I hadn't really revisited this band since, and I believe someone told me in the comments, like, oh no, they've done like a lot of cool stuff since, you should check them out, and here we are reviewing them. So this band is kind of a blend of a lot of things. It's black metal, post-metal, a little bit of D-beat, kind of crust in there, and occasionally some sludgy riffs, and it all comes together in a really cool, dreary, somber package.
Yeah, I've never heard of this band before, but the one thing that was made evidently clear to me as soon as we started listening to it was these guys are very good at creating the haunting melodies.
Yeah, big swells of atmosphere, lots of, tremolo riffs and tremolo harmonies that sort of blend together to be just kind of haunting and creepy. And I mean, occasionally more sinister, but for the most part, very just kind of like sad.
Yeah, very sad and melancholy, but at times also epicness.
Yeah.
But then it'll bring you to places where it seems like Robert Smith of The Cure wrote the melody line.
Unbelievably so.
Yeah, it takes you a bunch of different places, about 4 or 5 different things they got going on here, but this whole album is basically packed with beautiful melodies, haunting melodies, blast beats from hell, and the occasional, the angry monster in the back of the room with the microphone kind of vocals, which
definitely
does it justice.
Pretty much if you look at the album cover here, which is literally any street in Silent Hill just on a sunny day, it is pretty much kind of the mood. Like, it's very gray and drab, but again, big swells of emotion. And emotion is a big thing on here. This combines emotion and melody really well. The songs themselves are very interestingly constructed, and honestly, they don't drag. The opening track, Existence of Awe, kicks off with absolutely massive drum turnovers. The drums on here sound absolutely excellent and very punchy in the mix. And then you get these giant blast beat sections, these desperate fucking vocals, which sound like they are anguished as fuck. But man, it's these really cool swells and transitions on here that I like. Generally, when I think of like post-black metal and to a degree black gaze, one of the first bands I think of is Deaf Heaven. And while I would say there are some similarities, at least in like brief sections, because unlike Deaf Heaven, they don't drone on a fucking tremolo riff for 3 weeks, this didn't put me to sleep. This actually kept me engaged because they will completely break down the song into like a crusty D-beat, like transitioning the riff, just kind of playing it slightly different to match up the D-beat, and then just kind of deconstructing the entire song and building it back with very like Cult of Luna Neurosis-like elements in terms of like just single layers coming in and then building it all back up to huge crescendos.
The first 3 songs especially followed that format pretty much to a T. Every song started out with this kind of epicness and heaviness, and then it would just stop and basically cut out. And then you would get either, what was the one song with the bass line that I really like? Yeah, the very first song, Existence of Awe. When they cut it out for the first time, the bass started to carry the song back into the somber section to build it back up, and I thought that was done really well. They do it basically, like I said, for the first 3 tracks, which would be Existence of Awe, The Whir of Flies, and While Blood Springs Become Rivers. Excellent tunes, but they all kind of followed that formula pretty closely to one another.
Yeah.
Until we get to the singles Bodies as Driftwood, which is a really, really great song. One of the highlights of the album, and I think one of the reasons that it was a highlight is it's one of the shortest songs on the album, but it still does a good job incorporating all of their flavors into that shorter track. So obviously that's probably why it was a good pick for a single.
Absolutely. But the thing that it does is it incorporates another element too that we absolutely just kind of hit on right away. It's like, dude, this sounds like dreary goth rock, like very much in the vein of The Cure and Sisters of Mercy. Clean guitars to start off. Probably one of the grooviest drum patterns on here because there's a lot of, blast beats and D beats and then well, sections where they just completely drop out. Maybe he's just hitting a cymbal for an accent. But this is, I don't know, like kind of like an old school sort of like somber, melancholy jam that builds into like the blast beats. But it comes back to this, and there's kind of a completely different energy about it. Like, granted, it's still the same mood, dreary, somber, never fucking smiling ever, but it's this sort of incorporation of this goth rock that makes the song just absolutely infectious.
Yeah, and the drums really, maybe the reason that they were so loud in the mix is because I kind of just had this epiphany right now, is the drums really lead all the songs.
Absolutely. The first 3 tracks literally start off with just impressive like turnovers and just really clever like transitions into the main song. And the drummer is actually one of the only US members, Michael Cadner, which when I looked up his archives profile, the only band that I really recognized was a band that I didn't think I'd ever reference on this channel. The Number 12 Looks Like You was a spazzy metalcore band from like the mid-2000s. That was him, but on here he is just a blast beat and turnover machine, but fluid as hell. Like, honestly, a lot of the transitions really work because his drum patterns are just exceptionally tight.
Yeah, and he's basically, in my eyes, the conductor, as the guitars are used for more soundscapes and for the driving melodies, as opposed to just straight up riffs or just straight up, sludging on chords. They do that at times, but for the most part, it's really the drums carrying these sections while the guitars add to the soundscapes going on, and then the bass is just carrying that groove and locking in with the drummer based on the section. It's a really cool and interesting way to go about it.
And the production here, I think, is absolutely perfect for what they're going for. It's very lush, it's very full, but you can still pick out the individual layers so it doesn't get all muddied up. The vocals all kind of sit in the back of the mix, and 3 of the members actually do the vocals on here, so you get like different vocals that come in. Like, most of the time it's the very desperate, shrill screams in the background, but occasionally you get like more of a roar, maybe even like a spoken word. And they do have one guest vocalist on here, Lulu Black, who does very haunting, very akin to like My Dying Bride style, female vocals that accompany the song Eyes to Burning Skies, which has a kind of long, dreary start to it where it's just her and like some dissonant melodies, but then explodes into probably some of the most straightforward black metal on here.
It's one of my favorite tracks on here because of that contrast. It's the ultimate Jekyll and Hyde song on the album, because the back half was totally not maybe it was a little expected because of the album in its entirety, but the way they set up the first few minutes of this song with this haunting female vocals, which was really good. I enjoyed it, by the way. Could have even used more sprinkled into parts. It would have worked. But yeah, and then to just go, nah, fuck this. Boom! And then into the black metal. It was really, really cool. It was one of the standout tracks for me.
Honestly, this album doesn't get like sinister and cold very often. When it does, though, it does it exceptionally well. Again, Eyes to Burning Skies. And Where It Flies, I think, is a little bit more intense of a song. Like, the riffs are a little bit more just kind of aggressive sounding. And the very cold tremolo harmonies that are on Optograms of Disgust, almost kind of reminiscent of bands like Sacramentum and Dissection. But when this album kind of goes like a little bit outside of the box, like again we brought up Bodies as Driftwood, it's going like way more towards the goth rock. Sometimes it goes like very strange. The song Final Vows, probably one of the most standout tracks in here, and one of the just, I don't know, most interesting starts to any song on here.
So interesting, we thought the speaker was fucking up.
I thought you kept hitting start and stop on it.
And the intro cuts on this were really reminiscent of like almost a horror movie trailer, kind of like somebody's cutting to getting chopped up, or you're about to see the killer, or maybe the speaker's fucking up. We didn't know, but luckily it was the way they recorded it, which made it for a very interesting earworm to start the track.
Yeah, honestly, I was reminded of, well, like the audio equivalent of like a strobe light, or Texas Chainsaw Massacre with their yeah, it kind of has that effect, but you have this like droning melody that comes on behind it, and that was the thing that clued me. I was like, no, this is just how it is. But it's very dynamic and very abrupt, and honestly, as the song goes on, it has some of the heaviest riffs on the album, like more straightforward riffs, because a lot of this is mostly just kind of droning on tremolos, but at least switching it up often enough to actually kind of keep it interesting, because that is, again, kind of an issue with like black gaze and post black metal is it can drone on a bit. This switches it up often enough. It doesn't come across as too abrupt, and it doesn't come across as like, well, you did that a little late. But this song kind of just packs like a different kind of punch. Like, it's a little bit more aggressive, and not necessarily in a black metal way. It's maybe a little bit of the sludge metal influence coming through on that one, just because it's a little bit more percussive sounding in terms of the riffs.
And while this band uses a few colors to paint the overall picture of this album,
mostly gray,
they do a very good job of not repeating themselves or not coming off redundant and not carrying on things too long. They're very good at knowing when to move on to the next section. And that was really important for me as far as like not letting this album bore somebody or, just holding somebody's attention.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say there's enough dynamics and such that pop up on individual songs to really separate them. Like, this doesn't become kind of a clusterfuck where all the songs kind of bleed into one another just because they're kind of doing the same thing. They're arranged very specifically, and again, you have interesting tracks that pop up at good points in the album. Like I said, Bodies as Driftwood coming in at the 4th track kind of breaks up like everything that was happening on the first 3. Granted, there was some cool stuff going on that separated those tracks, but that one was very clearly just totally different from the rip.
And it's about halfway through the album too, so that's kind of a good pace. With 8 songs, there's only 8 songs on here. Each one's probably about 5 minutes or so. Yeah. So they're great length, but yeah, when you put Bodies as Driftwood in at number 4, it's kind of a good place to put it because right there in the middle, it kind of changes course a little bit too from the first, as far as the songwriting, I feel like from the first couple tracks.
Yeah. And it does a great job building up. Like, when it does break it down to those more isolated moments, like isolated bass lines or like chiming, cymbal hits and just droning atmosphere, it does a good job of building it back up and building it back up in like, a not super long amount of time. Like, it feels like, all right, this is very deliberately paced, and the crescendos on this album are generally huge, like giant swells of emotion and melody. And honestly, it just makes this a very engaging album, and it doesn't come across as like super pretentious at all. Like, doing this like, oh, this is a huge artistic statement and we have to play this riff for 3 weeks. It gets to the point, and all the artistic integrity is 100% there. And the most important part is it's very catchy, very engaging, and very well written. And I mean, all the emotion is still 100% intact.
Masters of melody and masters of weird sound effects.
Oh, the atmosphere is great.
The one thing I forgot to talk about is on Final Vows as well, they have almost like a bug zapper sound ending.
Yeah. I thought it was kind of like they recorded like a light bulb, like really
like
close to the filament, kind of just crackling and hissing. It's effective, though. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of in the background, and it did kind of make us like just kind of get in a little bit closer. It's like, what is that? That sounds kind of familiar-ish.
The whole album has a background feel. Like, it sounds like the soundtrack to a very sad motherfucker's life.
Yeah, lots of desperate pleading, but man, dude's got riffs though, at least. So
riffs for days.
Overall, I really dug this. Like, this was really solid and vastly different than the one I own. I would have to say I'm going to have to go back and check out some of the albums that I've missed, because I want to give this 4 stars. I really enjoyed this. This is post-black metal done exceptionally well. The dynamics are great. The songwriting is fantastic. The whole album flows beautifully from one track to another. The songs themselves flow beautifully in terms of their giant transitions. I didn't even get a chance to bring up like the D-beat punk stuff in here that just fucking really works. 2 kind of colliding ideas, atmospheric black metal and just D-beat crust punk, but no, they get that to work well. And man, I think a lot of it is just due to, like, again, the emotional outpouring and insanely tight drum work. I can't understate that. Like, I think the drums really push this album and make it a little bit more energetic and just more biting. But yeah, this is absolutely fantastic. If you love bands like, I would say, Cult of Luna, but also throw in like Harakiri for the Sky, Wayfarer, stuff like that, just definitely check this out. It's fucking great.
I gotta agree. 4 out of 5 stars. This was a very enjoyable listen, and like I said previously, this is like the soundtrack to one of the saddest guys in the world's life. And it does a good job of pacing. It does a good job of moving forward, not staying in one place too long. And no matter how many melodies they feed you on this album, they are never redundant. They are always strong and they're always creative. So this is something I would definitely listen to in the background when I want to have a couple beers and feel sorry for myself. 4 out of 5 stars all day.
So, if you enjoyed this review, give it a thumbs up. And if you are new to the channel, subscribe because we do stuff like this all the time. We are also on Patreon. If you'd like to help us out there is a link down below to thrallsmetal.com. Our Patreon link is there, obviously, because I just said that. But also our store is there, but we don't necessarily have that much there, but we will be reloading, but that will be after Denver Death Fest. That takes place April 20th through April 22nd in Denver, Colorado, because why else would we call it Denver Death Fest? We'll be there. We got to start making like travel arrangements and shit. But yeah, 28 bands, 3-day pass is $60, 2-day pass $45, 1-day pass $25. Come out and see us. Come out and watch a bunch of death metal bands tear it up on a stage. It'll be a lot of fucking fun. And if it's not, it's Jammin' John's fault.
Yes,
it's totally Jammin' John's fault.
Any complaints? Any punches?
Yeah.
Like in Happy Gilmore. You know, if you have any problems, it's John's fault.
Totally John's fault.
And that's the exact way it should stay. Perfect.
Totally. I think we're nice and covered there.
Thank you so much, as always, for all your love, support, and the minutes you waste of your day watching us shitheads talk about music. We cannot stress how much we appreciate you guys.
It's been amazing doing this for, almost 5 years, maybe? I don't know. It's kind of crazy. But yeah, it's honestly been one of the coolest things I think I've done in my life. And that sounds sad, because it might be. But it's been a fucking buttload of fun, and I look forward to doing more of this and talking to you guys. It's fucking amazing. So thank you all once again, and we will catch you later.